Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched They Cloned Tyrone from 2023. This is a movie that was not on my radar at all until I was scrolling through Netflix, as one does, and it happened to come up in my that mess of a feed they have. And all I saw was the title and a picture of Jamie Foxx in a big maroon coat and with a high top. And I said, well, that seems bizarre. Let's try this out. And I am really glad that I happened to stumble upon it because this movie is great. This was a surprise gem. I was expecting something interesting at the very least. But I was even more pleasantly surprised in a whole bunch of different ways with this one. This is a directorial debut from, I'm going to mess up this name, Joel Taylor, who it looks like has a couple of writing credits in the last few years, but this is their directorial debut. And I am incredibly pleased with their output. This is a fascinating, they also co-wrote this. This is a fascinating movie that has a bit of a precedent in terms of where what the cinematic landscape has looked like over the last couple of years, and yet brings a lot of both historical cinematic knowledge and influences, as well as a lot of like fresh ideas and sort of just very smart production. I am going to have to be careful about what I talk about with the film. Now, with the title, it's not, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there are some aspects of sort of fantasy science fiction going on here. And it sort of gives away part of the hook of the whole movie, but that's sort of set up very early. And I really like the way they went with a lot of things in this film, including the fact that They Cloned Tyrone, being the title of the film, doesn't really tell you anything. It tells you something to anticipate early on and not much else. It does not give much away. This is also a movie that is not entirely reliant on surprises or reveals either, which I think can be a tendency in things in, I was going to say the mystery genre, but I think we're going to have to talk about the genre in general, because part of the reason I've mentioned before how much I enjoy genre blending stuff, and this movie blends a whole bunch of different genres at the same time in some really smart and very smooth ways. This is, I would say, it's comedy and science fiction, and also a bit of horror, and a whole bunch of like different small aspects of it dip into different other cinematic areas. In particular, I think while this would probably not be considered a blaxploitation film, blaxploitation being sort of a dead genre in a lot of ways, it takes massive influence from the blaxploitation genre, both directly and as sort of a deconstruction of the blaxploitation genre. There are a whole bunch of things that at first in this film don't quite make sense, both in world and sort of in production, where you're like, why are these two things blended together? Why are these two elements that it seems so disparate from each other. Why are they in the same frame? Why are they in the same scene, et cetera, et cetera? And how do I talk about this without talking about it? There end up being really good, and not like surprise, but there are ways in which, as this movie unfolds, it shows you exactly what it was trying to do from the very start in really smart and interesting and clever ways. I think I'm going to have to come back and talk about the content a little bit more, but let me talk about more generally the production and that sort of stuff first. I would not have guessed that this was a directorial debut. The direction in this movie is really solid all around. It's not in particular stand out for being like excellent or really inventive in one particular way, but it is very, very well done all around. Takes a lot of directorial influence from, again, a variety of genres, camera moves, and stylistic choices that are in keeping with a bunch of the different genres that this movie touches. And my only real complaints with the filming and direction is it is a little bit dark and a little bit grainy, and seems to have been filmed on real film, which has its ups and downs. I've talked a little bit about film versus digital and how that can affect things. And I understand that they might have chosen to go with film specifically for the reason of paying homage to the 70s and 80s films that this movie starts to pay homage to, and the sort of quality issues in both the sort of fantasy and sci-fi genres, the horror genres, and the blaxploitation genres of the 70s and 80s. Those are all places where the production values end up being a little bit low for lack of for being niche products. And so in a way, I get why they did that. However, because of some of the other stylistic choices within the film, and it being kind of substantially color graded in certain ways, a lot of scenes being relatively low light because they use a lot of naturalistic light, it makes some scenes a little bit too muddy, and sometimes takes, in a few particular cases, takes some of the impact out of a reveal or something like that, because it takes you just a half second longer to register what's going on screen because it's a little bit dark and muddy, and it sort of takes the sort of experience of that reveal, it takes the impact out of it a little bit. So it's really like only a practical, like let the visual shine through kind of thing that made me at a few points go, I wish this might have been digital, or might have been a cleaner film. As far as the writing and the casting, the writing is really, really smart throughout. There is a lot of dialogue in this film, and they talk a lot about a lot of different subjects, and it requires finesse to write a lot of dialogue in the first place of any kind, and it takes a lot more to have characters who have a lot of dialogue together not come off like they are meeting each other for the first time or expositing too much towards the audience, or especially in a case like this where they are dealing with unusual circumstances that they don't understand, or that they are like struggling to grapple with. This is a problem particularly in the sci-fi area, in the sci-fi genre. Not saying too much and letting everything speak for itself is a really hard balance to strike, and is done really well. To that effect, or to that same point, the actors in this film are all excellent, from the like three leads to all of the minor characters. They all fill their roles impeccably. And in reference to the script, having the three leads talk as much as they do and have the social dynamics that they've already had established as the characters that they are in the way they relate to each other before we even know them, goes a long way, especially when that script moves at a pace that relies on you not falling behind. And so the visual storytelling and the facial and physical acting of the actors to convey a lot, like more information even faster by the way they are interacting with each other. Like, it's really, really good. Now, as far as individual actors, I don't think I've seen Teyonah Parris in anything before. I might have seen her. I'm not sure what I've seen her in before. She looks familiar, but I don't think I've seen her before. I want to say Jamie Foxx falls into that camp that I've sort of mentioned before, of actors who mostly play like a variant of their own person. You know, they play variants of Jamie Foxx plays variants of Jamie Foxx. That said, I haven't actually watched Ray, so maybe that's an exception. I haven't seen him in enough things, but like generally he plays variants of himself, and this is another case of that, but I think it works really well. John Boyega, I want to give a particular shout out, not only because thank goodness he has escaped the curse of Star Wars, the curse of any massive franchise that threatens to define a young actor's whole career. I am really glad to see him given a different opportunity to play a very different character. That said, I do want to particularly shout him out because I'm going to be a bit of a snob here, or a hipster. People call me a hipster for this, because I knew John Boyega way before Star Wars, in a film called Attack the Block, which I think I've mentioned before, maybe once. Attack the Block is a little British film that I adore. It has a weird kind of some weird parallels as well to this film. So I highly recommend you watch that as well, especially if you watch this and like this. He's a great actor with a lot of range, and I'm so glad he escaped the curse of Star Wars, because he gets to show a lot of different range in this film, rather than just playing, what was his name? Finn. That was the character's name. Boy, oh boy. So a special shout out to John Boyega. I want him to succeed massively and not have Star Wars shadow over him forever, because that's a real curse. There are also a lot of minor characters, some by people I've never seen before, some by some notable actors. Might call them cameos, but not really. Just good casting. And everybody is done up in a lot of really good costumes and hair and makeup that go a long way towards doing additional storytelling, like who this character is, who they are supposed to be, and what we can know about who they are as a person just from how they can, or what they wear and what they look like. That said, okay, I need to put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that because I need to talk about that specifically. I'm going to brush over a couple of other things real quick. The soundtrack is really, really solid. It's a mix of a whole bunch of different genres and a whole bunch of different eras that all work really well. And I appreciate how the mixing works so well as some remixing is done to blur the lines between genres, and the use of specific instrumentation to call back to sort of multiple feelings, multiple eras of music at the same time, works great. So now I'm going to unpin those couple of things that I've been meaning to talk about and say that what's going forward, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but it might give you a little bit more stylistic information than is entirely neutral. It may give you some idea of what to expect, that I highly recommend you just go and watch it instead and then come back to this. So as far as the costumes and who the characters are and the music, this all goes towards elements of the plot and elements of the whole movie's concept that are really smart and never called out explicitly, but sort of bring every weird aspect of this film into a whole. Because, try not to be spoilery here, there are reasons why you have all these disparate elements coming together, and these characters who sometimes feel a little too tropey and a little bit too on the nose, and pulling from these very different genres, where you've got one character who feels like he's straight out of a blaxploitation film, one who feels like he's out of like a gritty 90 or like 2000s crime movie, and then like others that feel like they're just sort of caricatures, very unfavorable caricatures in some cases of marginalized communities, and the whole hook of the film being there's a sci-fi thing going on in the hood is like it's not a completely unique idea, it's not a completely new one, but it's taken in a whole new direction. And the idea that these characters all coexist and don't like everything seems kind of normal, and it's so reliant on having a certain like cinematic literacy that clearly was deliberately put into, like, this movie has a lot of meta notes inside of it, references within references to like the characters talking about movies in the script of the movie. And so like that kind of both the cultural literacy that the characters themselves have, as well as the cultural literacy of the viewers, to be able to say, oh, look at these things from this genre and these things from this genre, and why are these here? And it starts to give you these sort of subtle undertones and these uneasy feelings, and gives you an idea of, what am I looking at? What am I looking for? And it really elevates all of the emotional responses of the characters as they explore this weird situation they've found themselves in. I want to talk about this a whole bunch more, but there's no way to really do it without spoiling the whole thing. Suffice to say, I really love this. I think it's really smart. There's certain elements where I think they could have gone just a little bit harder, like fully leaned into something even more, because this film is already not afraid to get a little bit cheesy and a little bit over the top. Like, there are a few things where I was like, just go that one extra thing. But as it is, I think it's really smart, really well produced, really well written and paced, and blends so many different things in a way I haven't really seen before. There is sort of an alignment with a couple of other very socially aware, social critique, science fiction horror kind of films that have come out in the last 5-10 years. I think probably the most notable one being Get Out. But this takes it a whole different direction and is really smart, really fun. And I hope that it doesn't die on Netflix, because as far as I'm aware, Netflix has the exclusive rights to it right now, and I only stumbled on it completely by accident. It's great. I really enjoy it. I highly recommend. If anything I've said about it sounds interesting at all, check it out. Absolutely. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.